hope she's not listening.
Edit that bit out.
She said, it's not. We can't just say unite. That's not good enough. And then someone in another rival camp was in one of the political email newsletters saying, well, Kemi can hardly do unity because she could start a fight in an empty room. So yeah, the unity is going really well so far. Summer's almost here, but politicians seem to be in a mad dash to make loads of announcements before the summer break.
Yeah, I'm still reeling, really. There's so much to go through. This is always a kind of end-of-term thing, but we've got an end-of-term flurry of activity on steroids. Obviously, a new government wanting to crack on, and so they are pushing everything out before they go on their summer holidays.
Well, should we crack on? I'm John Stevens, political editor of The Mirror.
I'm Sam Lister, political editor at The Express.
And this is The Vision Bell.
Well, the most significant announcement being made this week is the statement by Rachel Reeves on the supposed 20 billion black hole in public finances. Take us through it, John.
Yeah, so this is when Rachel Reeves became Chancellor, 3 and a bit weeks ago. She said she was going to get the Treasury to kind of look under the bonnet, see exactly what was going on, see what things had been, the government had said they were going to spend money on, but they hadn't found the money to do it, just so that any issues that were there, she could kind of get them out the door and pin the blame on the Tory party before she kind of had too much time in the job. And that's what we saw yesterday. So she published this document called Fixing the Foundations. She gave a speech in Parliament, and it wasn't quite a budget. We didn't get all the detail you'd get in the budget, but there was a lot of bits of news in there that it could have well have been a budget by the amount of news. And so she raised concerns. She said that there were loads of things that the government was spending money on if they'd overshot their budgets on. So things like the asylum system, the Rwanda plan, and paying for asylum seekers to stay in hotels. She was saying that was almost £7 billion over budget. She said that when you took into account the pay rises that the independent bodies have recommended for NHS staff, police, prison officers, armed forces, you name it. When you added those in, that was another £9 billion. And she came up with a list of other things like Rishi Sunak last year announced he was going to get rid of A-levels and introduce this advanced British standard. She said that even though that was meant to be his legacy, there wasn't any money set aside for it. She said when you added all these things together, you ended up with a £22 billion black hole just for this year. And so she said that she needed to take immediate steps to kind of reduce the black hole, plug it to some extent. So she announced yesterday £5 billion of savings she was going to make. One of those, probably the most controversial one, probably the one that people in the country will care about most, is the winter fuel allowance, which all pensioners get, or until now they got it. So they got either £200 or £300, depending on whether they were over 80 or under 80. And she said from this winter onwards, she's going to dramatically cut the number of people who get it. So at the moment it goes to 11.4 million. It's just going to go to 1.5 million people. And those are the poorest pensioners and people who are in receipt of pension credit or other means-tested benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I always suspected this Labour government would do over pensioners. I really did not think it would come within 3 weeks of them taking power. Essentially, this change, it is huge. So, OK, they have protected the poorest pensioners, those who receive pension credit. But there is a cliff edge. And so millions of other pensioners who are just beyond that trigger point, which is £218 a week, it's not a lot to live on. They are going to lose this winter. So they will be £200 or £300 worse off this winter. Now, bearing in mind, although the bills are falling, we still have very high energy bills as a result of the invasion of Ukraine. And so, I mean, this is a huge amount of money to take off pensioners just months before the winter. And we saw a video, Keir Starmer, during the election campaign, talking about how he'd been really moved by a pensioner he'd met who spent all day wrapped in a fleece because they were so cold they couldn't afford to put their heating on. And yet he's taking away money from pensioners who are on the breadline. And actually, if you even look at the pension system as it is, the new state pension, which only came in 2016, that was the pension that wrapped together all payments, so you didn't have to claim different bits of pensions here and there. That actually, if you are on the new state pension, you are already £3 a week better off than the lowest point you have to be to get pension credit. So essentially, anybody on the new state pension, if they are entitled to the full new state pension, they are not going to receive this winter fuel payment, even though they're essentially on £221 a month. I mean, it's nothing to live on. And so I just can't see how you can square that circle of wanting to protect the poorest pensioners and then actually taking this money off people who are on such a small amount this year. And campaigners have said the Chancellor is heartless for making this decision. This has attracted criticism from across the board. Even Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert that we're all familiar with, he has been very critical about this cliff edge. You've had people from across the political spectrum. I think it's a huge, huge mistake. I understand that many people think that pensioners are all wealthy and they're all going off on cruises every week. Some are, clearly, but actually millions are on just this... they're not in actual poverty, but they're not far off it, and they're really going to struggle this year.
I think that I can see that it is going to be really controversial. I think that one of the problems here, and one of the things I think the government is going to take action to address, is the problem that hundreds of thousands of people who are entitled to get pension credit don't claim it at the moment, and so they won't get these winter fuel payments. I think the government do need to do more to make sure that everyone who is entitled to this does get it, so those people don't lose out.
That pension credit, I mean, it's only 4 years ago since the last advertising campaign to make people who are entitled to it claim it. We know only about 60% do, but there's a lot of reasons why they don't. One, the forms are really complicated. Two, not everyone knows, even if there are advertising campaigns, not everyone's aware that they are entitled to it. Three, there is actually, and charities will tell you this, there is this sense of shame attached to claiming pension credit. Some pensioners just feel actually too ashamed to claim it. And so I think the idea that suddenly this government is going to solve all those problems when historically the pension credit claim rate has been static for many, many years, I just don't think that is really going to tackle that problem.
I think the other issue that we've not talked about, and something I know is important to our readers at the Mirror, I'm pretty sure is important to you at the Express, is the issue of the social care cap, which the government said it was going to bring in, and it would mean that people over their lifetime would only have to pay up to a maximum of £86,000 on personal care costs. So it covers certain things. So it would be basically paying for the care that people give you, but it wouldn't pay for kind of the accommodation or the food you get in a care home. But it would mean that some people, and we know that a lot of people can spend many, many years in care homes racking up huge bills. It would have been able to bring in a cap on those costs. And I know that when we interviewed when Keir Starmer came to Mirror HQ a couple of months ago, and we did a Q&A, and readers sent in their questions. And readers then sent in questions and said, is this something that you're going to be able to commit to? And at that point, he didn't commit to it. But ahead of the election, Wes Streeting did say that he didn't think that there was any reason that they would not deliver the cap, which was meant to come in October 2025. It'd been delayed twice by the Tories. I mean, that will be really, disappointing doesn't really cover it for how a lot of people will be feeling, because they are desperate for things like this to come in and to help them. But if we trace the route, where did this problem start? It started that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak first announced the cap in, was it September? It's autumn 2021 they announced it. And they said to pay for it, they were going to put on was it 1.25 percentage points on national insurance to pay for it. And that was controversial at the time, but they said they needed to find a way to put money in the system to pay for it. And then obviously that's one of the bits that Liz Truss took out in her tax cutting. And then since then, the government's taken more off national insurance. And then, oh, surprise, surprise, we get to now, it's about to just come in next year. And there isn't the money to pay for it. Well, of course there's not the money to pay for it because you took away the money that was meant to pay for it.
Yeah, I think that is a fair assessment of what has gone on. Clearly, this has always been a problem. This has been a problem for decades now, hasn't it? And successive governments have really wrestled with how to solve this issue. And it is a difficult one to solve. But you have to have at least the intent of wanting to solve it. And what happened yesterday was just ditched. I mean, there is no cap now, even theoretically. It's just gone. So I don't think there is any, certainly from the briefings we had yesterday, there was no intention of replacing this with anything else. And so I think that, yes, clearly there have been problems in the last 5 years. But the fact that actually, I suppose that at least they did want to try and solve this, and there is no commitment at all from the new government about tackling this issue at all.
But they may have wanted to solve it, but if you don't do the things needed to, I want to do many things, but if I then don't back that up with something, well, that's just meaningless. And that is just, one of the things Rachel Reeves yesterday was saying that the government had given people false hope. They announced these roads they were going to build, the 40 new hospitals, local areas thinking, we're going to get this new hospital in my area, was all well and good making the promises. But if you don't have any intention to pay for it or set aside any money, then that is just giving local areas and people caring for loved ones false hope. That's cruel.
Well, I think Rachel Reeves yesterday had this phrase about if we can't pay for it, we can't do it. But what was very clear yesterday was this was an incredibly political statement. On the day that she chose to give junior doctors a 22% pay settlement, it was the day she also chose to take £200 off poor pensioners. And I think that is a political choice. And let's not forget, the junior doctors clearly have some kind of case to make about the fact that pay has not kept pace with inflation. But a 22% pay rise. Now, ultimately, these people go on to earn huge amounts of money, six-figure salaries, and crucially, they have gold-plated pensions paid for by the public. And those gold-plated pensions are inflation-proof and guaranteed for life. That is a pension that hardly anybody in the private sector has the luxury of in this day and age. It just doesn't happen. So, to choose to give those people 22% on the day when you take £200 off millions of pensioners who will struggle this winter to pay their bills, I think that shows where her political instincts lie. And it is certainly to do with the power of the unions and Labour's instincts. They could have chosen to reform welfare to save some money. We have a ballooning sickness bill. That wasn't even mentioned. Instead, they went for pensioners.
Do you not think, though, we're on the public sector pay, there is a price if they didn't sort out these problems, though? And if you did end up in a situation where the strikes were going on and carried on and NHS waiting lists continued to go up, and then you ended up with more people unable to get the healthcare they needed. There is a kind of, that is leads to many other impacts. Then you end up with the problem that there are loads of people out of work because they're not well enough to work because they can't get the healthcare to work. That you do need to sometimes make these difficult decisions because, there is a massive cost if you don't do that. And something like the teachers, I can't remember what the figures were in the back of that publication they had yesterday. There were these figures on all the number, I think it was like 25 million school days had been lost because of strikes in schools. And that isn't just an impact on kids learning, and particularly kids from disadvantaged backgrounds who are always the people who kind of suffer the most in these instances. It's also the case that parents have to take time off work, and then you end up with there's a cost to the economy, which is cost in pounds. And so they did need to find a sensible way to settle these pay issues with workers across the public sector, else you would just get the strikes carrying on. And, some of the people who would pay the price for that would be older people who wouldn't be able to get an appointment at the hospital or the GP.
Well, what signal does this send? Essentially, you hold the government to ransom and they will give you 22%. So if you're a nurse now, what are you thinking next time round there's a pay settlement? Actually, the doctors got 22%. The doctors are on better pay than us. They have bigger career trajectories than us, so they've got the massive potential to earn a lot of money later down their career, which the nurses don't. So, shouldn't they get 22%? And then you have train drivers who seem to go off on strike at the drop of a hat. What are they thinking next time around? Oh, the government will give in. And so I think the signal here is that actually this is a government that will give in to the unions and hand out money to stop them striking. But ultimately, you have to remember here, pensioners are on fixed incomes. They can't go and earn more money. If you're in your late 70s, early 80s, and you are on a fixed income, you've got no ability to earn money elsewhere. And that's always been the reason that pensions have to be protected in a way that other areas don't. And actually, why would you take money off people who do not have that ability when you could tackle things like welfare? It just wasn't even mentioned yesterday. I don't understand why your priority would be taking money off people who have no ability to earn extra when you could save money in areas where people can earn extra money.
But what would you specifically suggest on welfare? What's the specific ideas? Just slash it across the board?
You have to do something to tackle the balloon in sickness pay. I mean, the number of people making new claims after the pandemic compared to before, it was more than double. And that's not sustainable. Those figures are not sustainable. But where is the will to address this? I've not heard anything from the new government about what they're going to do about this.
But that is why you do need to take steps like making sure people can get healthcare. And there is another cost on top if you don't give people pay increases. Then the NHS, we already know that there's loads of places in the NHS who are struggling to find the staff they need to provide services. If you don't offer competitive pay, then you lose your workers, which means then you have to kind of spend money to recruit new people. You have to kind of go and search them. And also you've got the issue that you have to start bringing in agency staff to plug the gaps, which obviously costs way more money. So does it make sense to kind of pay NHS workers who are on staff a bit more in the first place rather than spending all that money on agency workers?
Well, I guess we'll see. The proof is in the pudding, John. So in a year's time, I guess all these waiting lists will be gone. Everyone who's on the sickness benefit will be back to work with, great renewed vim and vigour. We'll see, won't we?
Well, I think actually, I mean, you say that slightly flippantly, but I do think that...
I say it hopefully, actually, but I do appreciate that sounded flippantly, but I do say it hopefully.
The new government, they do realise that they think that people would judge them on two main things: cost of living and the NHS. And so they do need to, particularly on NHS waiting lists, if they do end up in this situation that it's dragged on for, how many years have we been talking about different strikes in the NHS in different forms? They just know that if they don't deal with this now, that is just going to drag on, and there's going to be no hope of them bringing down those waiting lists. That they've clearly made a decision that the only way you deal with this issue is by taking quite decisive action now to just kind of get on with it.
Yeah, I think, and clearly they will be judged on those things, but they're also absolutely, definitely hoping that people will have short memories and they will have forgotten what they've done to pensioners in 5 years' time. I'm not sure that will be the case. There's a lot of anger out there already. These things were only announced yesterday, and there is a huge amount of anger amongst older people for the way they've been treated. I think they feel like they were misled during the general election campaign. There was no mention in that campaign of ditching the social care cap. There was no mention that the winter fuel allowance would even be a factor if they needed to find money to save, which clearly the state of the public finances, I think it's probably best we don't go into that, because you can argue backwards and forwards about who was right and wrong about that. But everybody knew that there was a kind of big spending squeeze to come, and that's no surprise. But nobody in Labour suggested at any point that the winter fuel allowance would be part of that.
Well, the real excitement this week is the Tory leadership contest, which, if people are enjoying it, it's still going to be going for a long, long time. So there's still many months more to savour and enjoy. But we've got the list of the 6 candidates who've put in their nomination papers. They've got the backing of 10 MPs, is what you needed to get into the kind of start of the contest. And then I guess they'll tour around the country for the next few weeks before MPs start the process of whittling them down.
Yes, so high drama, this surprise bunch of 6 who are slogging it out for 4 months. We have Kemi Badenoch, Priti Patel, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride, Robert Jenrick, and...
Oh, gosh, I knew you would start listing them and I wouldn't stop concentrating.
And...
It's in the paper.
Oh, God.
James Cleverly.
James Cleverly. How could we forget?
Just put that back there. But the one person who's not there that people may have been expecting, Suella Braverman, he says she did have the 10, she's just decided not to do it.
Yeah. I think it became clear a few months ago that there was really no chance of Suella Braverman entering this contest. And I think her approach during the general election campaign and since the defeat has been to be very, very vocally critical. I think, actually, although people have been frustrated about what's been happening in the party, it never goes down well to be so disloyal at the height of a general election campaign. So I think that went against her. But yeah, I think we have now on the right, Robert Jenrick has mopped up that support, and Priti Patel is obviously also a candidate of the right. Kemi Badenoch straddles the kind of right and centre of the party. And so you're going to see a battle between those 3, I think, really. And then obviously on the other side we have James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride. Mel Stride, I think, really is a candidate who is of the Rishi Sunak continuity Rishi candidate. I don't think, maybe I'm being wrong here, but I don't think he actually genuinely thinks he's going to lead the party into the next election. But what he can do is bring along those people who were supportive of Rishi Sunak, and that's a powerful group of people to take to another campaign. So you can influence the debate and also, I guess, perhaps have some kind of future big role in the party.
I think the problem so far, and obviously we've talked before about how it's tricky in opposition. Suddenly people don't care about you as much because you don't have the impact to kind of change people's lives in the next few years in the same way you do if you're in government. And when there was big interest in Tory leadership campaigns in the past, it was because basically the party was picking the next prime minister, and now they're picking the next leader of the opposition. So it's harder to kind of get newspapers, broadcasters so interested in what you're saying. But so far the campaigns have been, I mean, quite lackluster. Yeah. They're all basically saying the same thing, which isn't that interesting. You hear lines like, oh, we failed to deliver for the public, now we need to prove we can deliver. But it's like, well, you can't prove you can deliver because now you're in opposition for 5 years, that you had your chance to deliver, you didn't do it. And now, well, how do you prove you can deliver from opposition? That's really tricky. And you see some of the candidates saying some quite strange things. So Robert Jenrick wrote an article to launch his campaign, and he said, I can't remember the exact words he used, but he said, I'm going to be totally honest. I'm going to be upfront and honest. I don't want to just be Tory leader. I want to be Prime Minister. And it's like, well, like, state the bleeding obvious. Like, of course, that's what everyone, that's not raw honesty. That's just the obvious thing that you have to say. And a lot of the campaign slogans, I mean, Priti Patel's using Unite to Win, which Jeremy Hunt used unsuccessfully in 2019. Why I think, oh, that's a good idea. James Cleverly's is Unite to Deliver, which is obviously very similar. Kemi Badenoch said that Badenoch said she'll be on at me. I know, literally. Kemi Badenoch. Hope she's not listening.
Edit that bit out.
She said, it's not. We can't just say unite. That's not good enough. And then someone in another rival camp was in one of the political email newsletters saying, well, Kemi can hardly do unity because she could start a fight in an empty room. So yeah, the unity is going really well so far. And it will be interesting to see, do they have proper, at the moment it all seems to be very similar what they're all saying. But does anyone really have a proper conversation and a proper analysis of why things did go wrong at the election beyond what's being said at the moment?
I think this is the big problem, isn't it? And actually, as you say, it would be more interesting if the candidates were saying, no, I don't want to unite. I mean, clearly they're all saying, yeah, we need to unite the party. That's not a surprise, is it? So what else is it they have to offer? Now, we've discussed before, I personally think this campaign is far too long. This contest is far too long because even though the weather got to us, John, and we had a momentary slip about exactly who the 6 candidates were, we've known who they were going to be for quite some time. Everybody's known who they were going to be. And we all know what they stand for. So what are any of them going to say that is new over this next few months? I think that's going to be quite tricky. It is going to be difficult to get people to listen. It is going to be difficult to get people interested. One thing I would say is, so obviously I'm talking to Conservatives all the time about who they support, what they want to see. And although the main chat about Kemi is that she can start a fight in a room on her own, actually that's seen as a positive by quite a few Conservatives, and they are supporting her for that very reason. They want a political killer. They want somebody who, when Rachel Reeves stands up and makes a statement of the nature she did yesterday, will absolutely go to town on her and try to stop that narrative being placed in the public's mind. They want somebody who will absolutely take on Nigel Farage and stop his assault on the right of the party. They want somebody who can take on Keir Starmer very, very directly and robustly, and they think Kemi Badenoch is the one to do that. Now, we've got a long way to go in this campaign. We don't know how things will play out. It is too early to say. There are lots of ways Conservative MPs can almost manipulate the process by lending votes to campaigns that actually they don't really support, to try and put through a candidate that they think their man or woman can win more easily against when it comes to the final 2. So we've got a long, long way to go. But already I'm hearing about MPs being almost bullied into into supporting certain candidates. I think it is going to get quite nasty. I think it is not really going to produce any surprises in terms of what any of these people stand for and what they want to do. So I think it is going to be... I feel like it's a bit... You said at the start how long this campaign... It feels a bit like one of those Nordic noir box sets that I used to stupidly watch, and you get 20 hours in and think, why have I wasted 20 hours? This needed a good sub-edit. We could have done this in 6, and I do feel like that's where we are really with the Conservative Party contest.
Sam, what's your moment of the week?
Well, my moment of the week is the story about Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish Premier, and Keir Starmer holding talks about the possibility of a free movement deal for young people. A bilateral deal between Spain and the UK. The Spanish Premier put this to our Prime Minister when they met at Blenheim Palace earlier this month. Apparently, Keir Starmer did not rule this out. He said he would consider it. We've seen a lot of chatter about this type of arrangement for some time now. David Lammy wants an EU-wide one. Sadiq Khan wants a special deal for London with the EU. So I think we can see very clearly the direction of travel is to...
Pragmatism.
unpicking Brexit, ignoring the will of 17 million people, but there you go. John, yours.
My moment of the week is the Olympic opening ceremony, which obviously was a rather damp affair. There were some brilliant pictures of all the dignitaries, random European leaders in their plastic ponchos, and in the middle of them, Keir Starmer in his Team GB navy cagoule, which just looks striking. And like you compare that to Rishi Sunak getting wet outside Downing Street, he clearly come prepared.
Yeah, I think he did stand out. He did look like a man who regularly wears a cagoule. That's not the first time he's had that on, is it? But yes, I think he did at least look slightly less daft than the rest of them.
Right, we're taking a short break for the summer as MPs desert Westminster and go back to their constituencies. We'll be back in September. Remember to subscribe to us wherever you listen to us, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then we'll be back in your feeds in September. See you then.
Have a great summer. Thank you for listening. This is a Reach Studio production hosted by myself, Sam Lister, and John Stevens. Produced and edited by Lydia O'Malley, Shabir Nurzai. Our researcher is Sheila Mahmoodi, and design and art direction by Curtis Phillips Cozier and Luke Stidson. Audio managed by Matt Millard and social content managed by Gully Burrows and Ed Washington. Content production and design overseen by Yara Silva, Harry Dumanel and Spencer Robotham.